have that. And Mr. Seward was really right. And I told him that. Wait until we have a victory. And then the people in the North, the citizens, will be in a better mood, in a better mindset, and not be so heavily against the slavery issues. If I free them, the Northern people are afraid that all of those 4 million slaves are going to flood to the North. Not true. But how do I convince the people of that? And those are some of the arguments and some of the things that I have to deal with. France and England have threatened to acknowledge the Southern people, the Southern Confederacy, as a separate sovereign nation. If that happened, my task of keeping this country together is almost impossible. And I think you can understand that feeling. But finally we had that victory. Antietam, 1862, September. Ah, what a great and glorious day, because it gave me that opportunity. And I had said at the very beginning to my cabinet, I have made an oath to God that I will sign that document. And now is the time. And I signed that preliminary, which gave the southern states about 90 days to January 1 of '63 in order to come back into the Union, but they would have to come back into the Union without slaves. Had to be that way. There is no other way. It's too much. The only way that slavery is going to be abolished is going to be through this war. And that's something I know. I've known that since the early 1800s. I've known all of it. That's the only way. I had listened to a minister, and I think it was around 1854, 1856. I listened to a minister, a doctorate, PhD, but he made the comment that I believe this government is going to be in a civil war over the issue of slavery. And he even gave us the date, 1860, 61. That war will commence. Somehow he knew. The prophet, I have no idea. But I listened to that gentleman, and one comment that he made that shuddered me was that as he mentioned it in that meeting, and all of the people that were there is someone in this audience who is going to be heavily involved in that war. And somehow I knew he was talking to me. So you see, emancipation has been something that has been there for me for a long, long time. An 18-year-old working side by side with slaves. And I had the occasion one day, a little boy, black, Negro, slave, spilled a pail of water. Oh, or did he? But all of a sudden, the door opened and the master's son came in carrying the big bullwhip that he had. And he walked over, and as he walked, he saw this pail of water spilled on the tobacco leaves, ruined the tobacco leaves. It upset him. But that little slave boy was standing there, and he took that whip and he started to crack that whip at that little boy. And I stepped between them. And I said, no, he isn't the one who spilled the pail of water. It was one of our whites who spilled that pail of water, who knocked it over. not him. The reply came back, I didn't ask you. And all of a sudden, that whip started to come forward. And I grabbed that whip out of his hand, and on the other hand, I hit him, knocking him unconscious to the floor, bleeding. I was really angry at that man. How would you beat a young boy, 7 or 8 years old? How can you do that? But that's me. I'm an 18-year-old. I don't go for that. And I had to run for the river and go back to Indiana because I was working in Kentucky in Louisville. I had that opportunity to meet with those young people. How great. Education, back and forth, communication is there. But that's something now I have to watch. Yes, the Emancipation Proclamation. January 1, 1863, I signed the formal, and it became a lot more. An opportunity for the Negro slave. Escape. Join the army. Because I needed that. I had to have those troops. I had to have those colored troops. I needed them to save this country. I cannot save this country unless I first free the slave. I knew that. That's something that I told Douglass. Not the senator. Frederick Douglass is my friend. But that's what I have to see. I can't save this country. I have to have them. It's a way for them to become citizens. Not the Dred Scott decision where our Supreme Court Justice Roger Taney said very clearly, a slave is nothing more than property. Is he not a human being? Property? Property you can take anywhere in the United States. It opened up all of the United States to slavery. That's wrong. But I have no idea how it's going to all come out. But emancipation has to be there. It's there now. That's my pleasure. That's my life, is to be able to do that. But I know too that it's not a legal document as law. It's not law. It's only my feelings. And before this war is over, I have to have that 13th Amendment to the Constitution. And that's the fight, ladies and gentlemen, is to get that through Congress. Not an easy task. One of the great things that I had at that moment, there's a new state, Nevada. Nevada came into statehood on Halloween, 1 week before the election in 1864. I had that state now. That state will be Republican. And I know that with the 13th Amendment, I know that that state will be there for the 13th Amendment. They will approve it. One of the good things, because I know these happen, and I know the senators that are there, they're fighting to bring this 13th Amendment to the people of the United States. That 13th Amendment is the whole key. Emancipation Proclamation started all of that work, but it's going to take that 13th Amendment to make it law forever. There's so many things that I can tell you about that Emancipation Proclamation and slavery, those slavery issues that are there. But it would just take too long. But the meat of it is, it has to be that 13th Amendment. Have to have it. I will do anything in my power to get it through, to free permanently, forever, not just the slaves, but everybody in this country forever. That's my hope and that's my desire. 1863 was a great year. That Emancipation Proclamation on January 1. A great victory at Gettysburg, July 1, 2, 3, and 4. A great victory because now the tide has turned. Lee has lost his first great war battle. And now it's going to be a matter of time. A lot are going to die, but I know that. And it was there at Gettysburg, November 19, 1863. I stood before thousands of people there on that battlefield and looking out at all of the graves that are there. And I said, fourscore years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we're engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We're met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this, but in a larger sense. We cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men living and dead who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note no long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work, which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be dedicated here to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and a government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. But this war continued, and it wasn't long, and I was ready to take my second oath of office. There wasn't really any need to say much. 4 years of war have said enough. But part of what I said on that day, on March the 4th of 1865, was very simple. Fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray that this mighty scourge of war shall speedily pass away. Yet if God wills that it continue until all the wealth of the bondman piled up. But you see, it's a question. Slavery is almost gone. The war is almost over. That's my opportunity to talk to the people of this country, to tell them what is going to be expected of them after this war is over and we have to put this country back together again. That's there. That's what I wanted to get over to those people of this country in those few words that I was to say. Oh, I ended it a little differently. It's one of those things that I do on occasion. But I wanted to tell the people, you're going to have to put this country back together. You're going to have to educate the slaves. You're going to have to bring them into the family that we have in this country. That's where I am at. That's the few words that I wanted to say in that message. Oh, there was more. But I leave that for you to find is my greatest speech ever, because it was the end of the war. Put this country back together again. I lost my mother when I was just 9 years old. She died. I got a new mother. That new mother took two families, 8 people, put them together as one family. That's what we have to do in this country now. We have to take two sides, put them together, and make one nation under God out of it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I will take any questions. I don't know what time we have here, but I leave that to you. I have 5 minutes of questions. If you have a question or two, I'll be more than happy to answer. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'd like to have you tell us when you discovered that this was going to be your call.